get started and see if she shows up. We'll call the September 27th Board of Adjustments meeting to order. First item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the July 26th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Before we start new business there, just to let you know, we only have 4 members currently. It takes 4 votes to overturn the administrative decision should it be decided. Your options are to proceed with the 4 members or continue to another meeting when we can maybe have 5 members. So it's up to you.
We'll go ahead and proceed with 4 members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, item 2A is an appeal of an administrative decision, and looks like we have Kim.
Good morning. So, as you said, the Board of Adjustment review process for an appeal of an administrative decision is to grant the administrative's official decision with a presumption of correctness, and the burden of persuasion of error is on the appellant. And the 4 members are needed to reverse any decision of the administrative official. So the question before you today is, did staff err in its determination to deny the change of use permit application from Gill Investments Ltd. filed on August 15th, 2022, based on the determination that the proposed use is an adult bookstore, which is not an allowed use in the downtown mixed-use zoning district? So, as you know, the subject property is located at 74 Broadway, which is in the southwest corner of Broadway and First Avenue North. And there are also some relevant permit application deadlines that are noted. And the current Land Development Code was adopted in 1998, and previous to that adoption, there was no downtown mixed-use equivalent. So since that time, the city has embarked in multiple iterations of downtown master plans and is currently working on a refresh. And these master plans collect community voices to frame a vision for downtown. 74 Broadway is zoned downtown mixed use. The downtown mixed use, when it was established, was created with a vision to preserve and enhance the downtown area. It goes so far as to outlining design standards with building materials and requirements that the ground floors have windows or transparency so people can window shop as they're walking by. Around the same time our Land Development Code was established, the state of North Dakota created Renaissance Zone program. And this program was established with the intent that communities can create a zone that can be revitalized and use tax incentives to improve those community areas. So now we'll dig into the Land Development Code, and it outlines that there's a use table in which we look at different uses, and it would be allocated with a P if the use is permitted, and a hyphen or a dash if it's not allowed, or a C if it's a conditional use in each of the zoning districts. Here's an excerpt of the different uses that are being proposed. So the applicant says that the use is retail sales and service, and staff have determined that it's an adult use. In the blue box, you can see that in the DMU, which this site is located, adult entertainment center use is not allowed, and the retail sales and service is. So here are the definitions that you've probably read in your packet that outline the differences between the 2 uses. And again, you have the ability to review the information, understand that staff's determination is correct unless the appellant proves otherwise. So when staff was reviewing the information for 74 Broadway dated August 15th, they determined it was denied due to the use being an adult bookstore, which is not allowed in the downtown mixed use. And if you question exactly how that fits, the Land Development Code actually gives us additional guidance. So if a use type isn't listed specifically in the table, it says, go to this section 201203 and see if it helps you determine which uses fit best. So if you look in that consideration, it outlines, does it have actual or projected characteristics of an activity in relationship to the stated characteristics of each category use? And you have photos that the applicant had submitted to give you an idea of what they propose to include in the store. They've noted that customers would be required to be 18 years of age or an adult. And then number 10, it says, how is the use advertised? And just a quick internet search shows that this business and its website do claim that it is an adult use. And again, we looked at floor plans and different square footages for the different specific items that they propose to sell. And all of these things with the downtown mixed use zoning district being a unique character building zoning district, and that the information that the applicant had provided, the visual examples and product lists do include adult-oriented items that differ from regular retail uses. So in summary, the zoning administrator evaluated the layouts, the retail categories, the inventory, sales information, limited age for store admission, and determined the proposed use falls with the definition of an adult bookstore, where a substantial or significant portion of its stock and trade are distinguished or characterized by their emphasis on matter depicting or describing specified sexual activities or specified anatomical parts. The motion that's recommended is on your screen, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this point? None? Okay. We'll hear from the appellant now. You're welcome to come up to the podium.
Good morning, members of the Board of Adjustment. My name is Matt Hoffer, and I'll be speaking to you today on behalf of Romantics Fargo, Inc., the appellant in this matter. I want to be very clear at the beginning that Romantics operates a variety of different retail establishments, and those retail establishments are tailored to meet the zoning classifications in the appropriate location. For example, the other Romantics location in the city of Fargo has adult material, adult theaters, adult booths. It's specifically designed to take advantage of the uses that are permitted in that zone. However, what's before you today is not Romantics' online presence. It's not Romantics' other store. It is the very specific proposal for this use in the downtown mixed use development, or excuse me, the downtown mixed use district. This use is designed not to have any adult books, magazines, or periodicals. This is a purely retail sales and service establishment, actually just sales establishment, that is specifically designed to meet the zoning requirements of the DMU district. And what I'm asking the Board of Adjustments to do this morning is to apply the definition of adult bookstore that the city of Fargo has historically applied, both in Romantics' previous conversations with the city and with relation to other businesses that operate in the city of Fargo. In that regard, I'll direct you, I'm going to read it to you, but it's also included for you as Exhibit 3 to the materials that were submitted. And this is a zoning confirmation letter signed by Kylie Bagley dated June 16th, 2021. This was in response to a pretty much identical proposal to have a location that would not be an adult bookstore or any type of adult entertainment center as that's defined under the Fargo Land Development Code. And this letter to Romantics reads as follows. The undersigned certifies that the information contained in this letter is accurate based on or relating to the information supplied. That information supplied being that the proposed use would not carry any books, magazines, or other periodicals. Current zoning. For the property that is described by this letter, the current zoning is within the City of Fargo corporate limits. The current zoning classification of the property to be found is LI light industrial. It appears that a property is intended for use as an adult bookstore, adult theater, and adult arcade. Adult bookstore, adult theater, and adult arcade are permitted by right in the LI, limited industrial, subject to Standard A. Based on the attached letter from 2019, again, this is a letter explaining that there would be no books, magazines, or other periodicals. It is assumed that Sam and Delilah's, that is the south of the subject property, would remove most of the sexually oriented books, magazines, and other periodicals, which would no longer constitute which would no longer constitute Sam and Delilah's as an adult bookstore. This is by no means a surprise that Romantics is trying to pull on the City of Fargo. This is a conversation that this business has had dating back to, I believe, 2019, when they were looking at opening another location. The hope is still that Romantics can close a location on Pacific Ave, which I believe the city would look favorably upon, but that's really not a possibility until an alternate location is secured. The business has had years-long discussion with the city at all times. It's been confirmed. It's never been indicated to the contrary, that so long as the establishment did not carry any books, magazines, or other periodicals, it does not meet the definition of an adult bookstore. The definition of adult bookstore is very specific, that it has to have a significant or substantial amount of its stock and trade being books, magazines, or other periodicals that are characterized by or emphasize matters depicting or describing specific anatomical areas or specified sexual activities. In that definition, matter is very important. Matter isn't the physics sort of matter where we're talking about atoms and the like. Matter has a very specific definition that includes written material, and it's the subject of written material. So by omitting all of the written material, Romantics cannot constitute a adult bookstore within the meaning of the Fargo Land Development Code. And Romantics is here to be a good neighbor, to work along with the businesses. The business that you're going to see from the street is going to be no different than a Victoria's Secret. The window shopping isn't going to be offensive. It may even be an improvement from some of the businesses down the street that have, I believe it's glass water pipes and neon in the window. We're looking to be a good neighbor here. We're looking to work with the city to provide a presentable business that's designed to meet the Land Development Code. And so what I'm asking for the city and from the Board of Adjustments is to stick to the definition that was previously provided via the city or by the city via the certified zoning letter, and to follow the letter of the Land Development Code. This specific Romantics is designed to be very customer friendly, very attractive from the street, and most importantly, it's designed to meet the requirements of the City of Fargo Land Development Code, specifically to fit into the sales and retail use definition. With that, if any of the members would have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Does the board have any questions for the appellant?
If not classified as adult bookstore, you said it would be classified as a retail?
Correct. Yeah, because everything is retail, unless there's something that would bring it specifically within the definition of adult bookstore, and those are the items that the establishment has specifically chosen to omit. And as you'll note in the presentation from the city, so far not a single product that the store has indicated it will carry has been identified as an adult product. There's simply none. And adult product is a misnomer because there is no such thing as an adult product under the Fargo zoning code, but there's been no materials identified by the city planner, identified today in the presentation, that would qualify as matters regulated by the definition of an adult bookstore. There's just nothing. And we ask that the decision here be made on this proposed retail establishment and not any online presence or other stores that have different designs.
And the applicant states that it is an 18-plus venue, so you have to be 18 years and older to enter. In that same vein, there are storefront along Broadway. What is to keep anyone from being able to see the adult content within it?
It's a matter of layout. These stores are specifically designed to be customer friendly and to bring people in. So up in front, you're going to see shoes, you're going to see lingerie, you're going to see Bath and Body Works. And I suppose if you come up to the window and cup your hands, that you could find more of the intimacy aids and the like that are along the back wall. But whether or not the establishment restricts admissions is not part of the decisional criteria. That's certainly something Romantics could do away with, but that's done as a courtesy, and because quite frankly, they're not interested in customers that are under 18 years of age.
So the 18 is not a requirement by the city as a
Correct.
applicant.
Correct. That's just a store's choice.
So in our packet, there are a number of pictures that I believe were submitted by you of the types of products that'll be sold there. So are you saying that these are the products that you're going to sell there, or they're going to be different at this store?
I would say that is similar to the products that are going to be sold here. The stores are hesitant to completely stock their shelves until they've had all their inspections and approvals, because they've run into situations before where they've had to take everything down. But that is a similar store. I can't say that it's going to be identical to that store, but it's a similar store that's designed to be inviting. As you see the front area, that would be visible. I guess it's hard to tell from the photos what exactly is the front and what exactly is the back, but you can see that there's a substantial amount of clothing, of Bath and Body, and that's what you're going to see when you walk by from the street. And the intimacy aids and the like, they'll be in the back. They won't be emphasized to anybody passing by, and most importantly, they don't trigger any of the provisions of the definition of an adult bookstore.
So if it was determined to be a retail center today, what is to keep the retailer from displaying adult content now that is no longer considered an adult bookstore?
That would be zoning enforcement, I would imagine. Just like if we came in as a sales use and decided to, open up a factory there. Fargo intends to do what it says it's, Romantics intends to do what it says it's going to do. And if it spilled into the area of an adult bookstore, that would be a issue for, I don't know your exact arrangement here, but it would typically be zoning enforcement that would address something along those lines. It's not as though if it's approved as a retail use, then it's, fair game for anything. If they're approved for retail use, they have to be a retail use, and they will be a retail use.
So along those lines, question for the city. So at what point, at what point do they cross the line? How do you guys determine at what point they cross the line between being retail and then adult bookstore?
Sorry, Mike, we have a procedural question for you.
Okay.
So I missed your question altogether as we were coordinating. I think one suggestion might be if the applicant is interested in doing this, and if he would be interested in doing this, is Kim could redo her presentation to allow Deb Wendell-Dobb to join the dais, and that would give her the ability to vote if that is.
Oh, Deb, I'm sorry, I didn't see you sneak in.
Yeah. So if that would be something you would entertain
Yeah,
as a board.
so Deb, were you here for his entire presentation? Yeah,
I don't believe so.
okay.
I guess it'd be at the pleasure of the chair and the board.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with that. Do either anyone else on the board?
Do you
Right.
mind doing that again, Kim?
Come on up, Deb.
A request for the city's definition, or a request from the city, could you define again the adult bookstore as written in the LDC? Just to clarify so that everyone understands what we are apples and oranges comparing.
If it pleases the board, I have the definition in front of me. I can read it if you'd like.
Okay.
According to the Land Development Code, an adult bookstore is an enclosed building having a substantial or significant portion of its stock in trade, books, magazines, or other periodicals that are distinguished or characterized by their emphasis on matter depicting or describing specified sexual activities or specified anatomical areas. And of course, both specified sexual activities and specified anatomical areas are also terms of art that are defined further in the code to be very specific things.
That is your question? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Kim. Round two.
Sorry for the frantic scooching back, but I'll get back to the beginning. So again, the process for reviewing an appeal of an administrative decision is that the Board of Adjustment would take the official's decision with a presumption of correctness, and the burden of persuasion of error is on the appellant. And a vote of 4 members is needed to reverse any decision of the administrative official. So the question before the board today is, did staff err in its determination to deny the change of use permit application from Gill Investments filed on August 15th based on the determination that the proposed use is an adult bookstore, which is not an allowed use in the downtown mixed-use zoning district? The subject property is located at 74 Broadway, which is in the southwest corner of First Avenue North and Broadway. You can also see the timeline of different applications and communications. To give a little history, the current Land Development Code was established in 1998. And at that time, there was no previous downtown mixed-use equivalent. So they created a downtown mixed-use zoning district to really shape and respond to the numerous master plans that the city has embarked on to get community feedback to really create a community vision for downtown. So here's the zoning map. 74 Broadway is downtown mixed use. When this zoning district was created, it was really designed to preserve and enhance downtown's historic area. And the city went so far in this district to create design standards specific for building materials and ground floor transparency, requiring windows so people can window shop when they're walking. During the same time frame, the state of North Dakota established Renaissance zones, which created economic incentives for redevelopment of areas that each community can designate to revitalize their community. So as we dig a little deeper into the Land Development Code, the use table outlines the different uses that the city can consider, and they allocate a P for a permitted use, a C for conditional uses, and a hyphen for uses not allowed. Here's an excerpt for both the adult entertainment use category and the retail sales and service, and you can see the downtown mixed use zoning district does not allow adult entertainment center use category, but it does allow the retail sales and service. Here are the specific definitions, which are also included in your packet. And again, it's the Board of Adjustment's role to consider all of the facts at hand and presume that the staff's determination is correct and the burden of persuasion of error is on the appellant. So staff reviewed all of the information and sees that 74 Broadway is zone downtown mixed use and an adult bookstore which is not allowed in that zoning district. So if you have some questions as to exactly how uses fit when sometimes they're a little specific, the use table also goes into a definition that says the use type that is not listed in the use table, the zoning administrator is authorized to make a similar use interpretation based on the category descriptions. And here is that guidance. So it says review the actual or projected characteristics of the activity in relationship to the stated characteristics of each use. And included in your packet, you can see the photos of examples as example stores from the appellant. You can also see that they are proposing to require customers to be 18 years of age to enter. And you can just see a little bit of a business model. When you do an online search, it says, how does the use advertise itself? So just a quick view of that. You can also ask for some information on how the store would be laid out and what the materials or merchandise would be. And so in your packet, you can see the floor plan that was provided by the appellant. So you can see the different categories and locations of each of those uses. And again, the downtown mixed-use zoning district is only located in downtown Fargo. It has requirements for ground floor window transparency and enhanced designs of the building materials. Downtown in Focus Plan has a vision for downtown to be a family-friendly destination. The visual examples of the products were concluded to be adult-oriented and differ from regular retail uses. So in summary, the zoning administrator evaluated the submitted floor plans, retail categories, proposed inventory and sales information, limited age for store admission submitted by the appellant, and determined the proposed use falls into the definition of adult bookstore, where a substantial or significant portion of its stock and trade are distinguished or characterized by their emphasis on matter depicting or describing specific sexual activities or specified anatomical areas. Staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment affirm staff's decision to deny the change of use permit. The recommendation is in front of you.
Thank you, Kim. Deb, is there anything you would like the appellant to repeat from their presentation, or?
I
I apologize that was late. I came in about 9:14, so I don't know how long you had been presenting.
Okay, I feel a little bit like Groundhog Day here. The one thing, Member Wendell Dodd, that I would like to bring to your attention in case you didn't see that part of my presentation was Exhibit 3 to Appellant's Materials, which I believe is before you, which is a zoning confirmation letter from 2021. Romantics is very diligent when they approach jurisdiction to make sure they have all of their ducks in a row. And this was the zoning confirmation letter was with respect to a different location, and it was going to be located next to what existed as a adult entertainment center. It was a bookstore and arcade. It had several uses in it, and it wouldn't have been possible to build this new location next to the existing location if they were both adult entertainment centers under the Land Development Code, because there is I believe it's a 1,200-foot buffer zone that's required between adult entertainment centers. So in speaking with the city, Romantics explained, okay, we're going to take the existing location and we're going to close down the arcade, the theater, and we're going to remove all of the sexually oriented books, magazines, and periodicals. And this was an ongoing conversation with the city. It was clear that the planning department, by its own words, were all on the same page, and it ultimately culminated with the zoning confirmation letter that you see as Exhibit 3, which confirms that as long as the business removed most of its books, magazines, or its adult books, magazines, and periodicals, that it would not be a adult bookstore under the definition of the Land Development Code. Unfortunately, the numbers in that location ultimately didn't work out. This location became available, or at least Romantics learned of it. And again, Romantics was upfront with the city. We've stated exactly what we were going to do. Mr. Porter behind me has spoken with the mayor. He's had many conversations and emails with the planning department. They've been very upfront here because there's no reason for them not to be. They know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is designed to meet the retail sales and use classification. Because the other thing I want to emphasize is that the location that is proposing to open at 74 North Broadway is not the website. It's not the location that's out on Pacific Avenue. It's not any other location. It is a location with an inventory and materials that are specifically designed to comply with the Fargo Development Code and the requirements of the DMU district. And the other item I want to emphasize is that there's a very specific definition of what is and what isn't in the definition of adult bookstore. And as we stand before you today, the planning department still hasn't identified a single proposed product that Romantics would carry at this location that would fall within the materials regulated by the definition of adult bookstore. Romantics is proposing a very appearance-friendly location here that would meet all the requirements of the zoning code. Another item worth mentioning is there are two Enchantises locations that are explained in detail in Appellant's materials. These locations as well, although they're in zoning districts that permit adult bookstores, they're located in areas that the use standards for a adult entertainment center would not let one exist because they're too close to either a park or to a residence. And for both of those Enchantises locations, they carry I struggle to say a similar product use because it's a little bit more adult oriented than what even Romantics is proposing here, but it at least goes to show that historically the city has interpreted an adult bookstore as Romantics does in this situation, that this proposed use would not fall within that definition. And so what I'm asking the board to do today is not to do anything new, to apply the same definition of adult bookstores to romantics today as they did last year, as they have for years for the Enchanted Seas locations. And that has been the same definition that's been understood between romantics and the planning department, as they've been very open and honest about this proposal. This is a very specific location with a very specific product mix designed to meet the zoning code. And with that, I'm open to any further questions.
I had a question about the statement. The city responded with removing most of the adult books. What is most? How do you define that?
It's not mine to define.
I guess maybe my question is, will you have any?
There's books, magazines, periodicals. No, there'll be none at this location.
Okay. Another question. Part of the definition, you had mentioned the specified anatomical area, and you mentioned that it goes further into it. Part of that is human genitalia, public regions, buttocks, female breast below the point immediately above the top of the areola. It goes on. My question is, in your submittal, you have a photo of the romantics with the storefront having mannequins.
Yes.
Mannequins are in lingerie.
Yes.
Their buttocks, part of the anatomical portions are shown. Would that be considered part of human anatomical proportions then?
No, the mannequins are not being offered for sale. The lingerie is. The lingerie itself, whether it's hanging on a rack or whether it's on a mannequin, the lingerie itself is not depicting or describing any of the anatomical areas. It certainly doesn't have matter as the definition of adult bookstore requires, which is a subject of a writing. And even the hosiery and other items that are offered for sale there that have packaging, the anatomical areas are airbrushed out so that it is more mannequin-like, because the requirement is that it depict or describe, or that it's characterized by an emphasis upon those. And the packaging of the product isn't the product that is being for sale, and even the packaging itself isn't characterized by depicting those anatomical areas. It's even where you have packaging with the item, the model is airbrushed out in sensitive areas so that it avoids that issue. And so if you look at products themselves, shoes, lingerie, the like, they don't depict or describe any of those anatomical areas. The Bath and Body Works don't depict or describe those anatomical areas. Even the intimacy items themselves don't actually depict or describe any of the anatomical areas or the activities. It just doesn't fit the definition.
Furthermore, in that your exhibit of photos, there are pictures of dildos
Yes.
on the wall. Though they are not describing a specific sex act, they are quite evident a human phallus. Again, is that considered a part of an anatomical definition?
The simply being phallic itself in shape would not meet the definition, and to the extent that there may be a anatomically correct apparatus, those are few, if any, and could be specifically avoided.
When you say specifically avoided, is that the customers are specifically avoiding, or the retailer is?
The retailer could avoid that.
I think part of my reticence is the lack of clarity on what this will be. I design buildings, and my clients want to see what they look like. I have a floor plan which tells me things, but I don't know what that is in reality. The photos, they depict, and that's helpful. But when you say it is not going to be that, it's hard for us or anyone to know exactly what it's going to be in the end. Obviously, a definition doesn't necessarily define what is there. So is there any way to further elaborate on what a passerby will see? Someone who is not interested in going inside, but simply walks by.
I'm sorry, I missed your question in there.
Is there a way to further illustrate what a passerby will see without having, if they don't want to see anything sexually suggestive, what will they see?
As I explained earlier, at least from the from a casual's passerby, you're not going to see anything different from a Victoria's Secret or the like, because you do have the floor plan that was part of the city's presentation that has all of the clothing and the bath and body and the shoes that are located on the street view, and then the intimacy aids and the like are located along the back. And you know, if you're looking at a store that's front to back from me to you, you're really going to have to be interested and make an effort to see anything beyond the lingerie and the bath and body. And as far as the specific layout, that's something that the establishment would be willing to talk with the city about. It's hard to. I mean, they've been open with the city since the very beginning, and they're very interested in working with the city. But the idea is not to offend passersby on the sidewalk, not to push people away. The idea is to be an inviting store that welcomes people in. You want people to walk by and come into the store.
I guess I don't know where our board suggestions or ideas stop. I guess my thought is there a way to find a medium between the two? You know, these are the items that are okay to display in the retail window. You know, obviously stuff back of house are for the customers who walk in and explore further. So is that a division of space that the front window displays lingerie, Victoria's Secret-esque, and the sex objects are out of view unless a customer walks in?
Can you give me just one moment?
I'm gonna answer
I
your.
want to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn.
Yep, give me 1 second here. So, to answer your question of like, where do we come in, where do we, as it sits, we're reviewing the application as submitted. So, I mean, we can make suggestions, but I think based on the content and the information in our packet, we need to make a decision whether or not the zoning administrator either made the correct interpretation or they erred in their interpretation. Good. If they want to revise their plan and come back, then I think that's something they could do. Correct? Right.
I have a question. Is this purely come down to the definition? And if it's purely an interpretation of the definition, is an attorney in a better position to make that judgment than the Board of Adjustment?
Yes, I think you're right, Deb. I think it really boils down to what's the definition of adult bookstore, and, you know, it's pretty vague, you know, I mean, there's specific things listed, but it's, in my opinion, it's part of a larger category of uses, right? The adult entertainment center, which is really intended again, in my opinion, to be a catch-all of all kind of adult-oriented type uses. So, I mean, yes, you're right. I think what we're talking about here is, you know, the applicant or the appellant is claiming that the definition, that the uses that they propose to do and products they propose to sell there do not meet the definition of adult content, and the city's saying that it does. So
Well, I guess I go back to a little bit, just going back to the definition, because I think it boils down to really what the definition is. And maybe the city staff can speak to the 2019 correspondence with the applicant, appellant, about the definition. You know, I think there's communications regarding removal of sexual oriented books, magazine, other part of periodicals, then would not define as adult bookstore. So I think part of me is thinking it boils down to that. I mean, we're talking about definitions here. And looking at this, looking at communications from the city, I think there was communication saying that as long as there's no books, periodicals and stuff there, it wouldn't be classified as an adult bookstore. So I guess maybe the city staff can go back and maybe discuss, talk about what led to that decision and what changes from here to now.
Whoever would like to take that question.
Yeah, I'll take those questions. Thank you. And yeah, just for a standard of protocol, I know you generally don't see this many staff at a zoning board of adjustment meeting. And so just to kind of remind people of part of the public hearing process, when you do have direct questions for us, make sure to just bring that out too. We don't want to interrupt in your discussion of flow of communication. So, but yeah, I think, my assessment is you're interpreting and processing just as staff did in their offices as part of this application. I would say in purpose for the zoning compliance letter and that interpretation, we have to remember the purpose of a zoning compliance letter is specific to that location and specific to that site, and the application materials as part of that permit. And so, from an email communication, hypothetically, you'll notice at the end of some of the email correspondence, this no way institutes a building permit or permission for a building permit. So we usually have that clause. And also the intent of zoning confirmation and zoning compliance and all of those things. When we talk about the role, I think a lot of this comes down to the role of the zoning administrator and the role of zoning ordinances and their intentions. And so when we think about the staff's role, it's really to help the applicant meet the ordinance, right? And so at the end of the day, it's the owner's responsibility to meet the ordinances. And so I would say, again, the zoning compliance letter is specific to a limited industrial zoning district and is specific to that location on the north side. In terms of the other store and business, perhaps we have some zoning compliance issues. That's a different matter, not part of this hearing. And so in terms of the, were those the two questions, Jared?
Yeah, that's fine. It just,
Yeah. But I think, I guess maybe to Member Wendell Dobbs' question, it's about really, and Chair Love, it's really, we looked at that's what I was gonna say, sorry, the zoning powers. Did the staff make an error in, the purpose of a zoning ordinance is to implement the master plan and the comprehensive plan that the city's adopted. And so that's where we go back to, that part that Kim presented of, how do we interpret this use in its relation to these criteria?
And if I could,
Go ahead.
the definition of adult bookstore doesn't mean anything different in a light industrial zone than it does in the DMU district. The definition is the definition, and the zoning administrator's job is to follow the definitions as they're set forth in the land development code, and that's not what they did here in the matter that's before your decision. We have a very clear interpretation of the land development code in the prior certified zoning letter, what is a adult bookstore and what specifically would not be an adult bookstore in any zoning district in the city of Fargo is the same. The definition applies equally to all districts. There's nothing about any particular district that would allow deviation from the text and would allow deviation from the interpretation that the planning department previously provided and that it continually provides with respect to the Enchantises locations that would not be permitted to exist if the definition that the zoning administrator has applied to this matter was applied to those existing locations. It's very clear that in order to be an adult bookstore, there has to be books, magazines, or other periodicals. If those materials don't exist, it's not a bookstore. Simple as that.
Yes, I'm curious.
Please, could you speak to the first portion in the land development code for adult bookstore, which is stock in trade, as I show is defined as the typical subject or commodity a person, company, or profession uses or deals in, or the goods kept on hand by a business for the purpose of its trade. I guess you've covered, the books, magazines, and periodicals very well, but my concern is with that first portion, stock in trade.
Okay, and that is, of course, a term that has not previously been used by the planning department when looking to determine whether an establishment is an adult bookstore or not. It is not part of the list of what is an adult bookstore. It's, a bookstore has a stock and trade of books, magazines, and other periodicals. And legally speaking, even if you have a general catch-all term in a list of terms, that is limited by the specific terms that are used. So for example, in reverse, it would be books, magazines, periodicals, or any other items. And if you had a definition like that, looking at it, any other items would look to something that is kind of the same genus as books, magazines, and other periodicals. You're looking at a definition of a bookstore that refers to books, magazines, and other periodicals. It's an oddly written provision in that it starts with stock and trade. I read it. The planning department in the past has read it as the stock and trade being an opening to the list rather than part of the list itself. But even if you were to look at it as part of the list, then it would still be limited by the specific terms, that it would have to be something like the more specific items that were used. And the definition itself says distinguished or characterized by matter. And as I mentioned before, matter has a very specific definition in this context. That is, it's not, atoms and molecules type of matter. Matter refers to the topic of a writing. So the way the language is read naturally in determining the any general terms in the context of the specific terms used, and using all the terms that are in the definition. Specifically, it has to depict, or it has to be characterized by matter, some type of writing with a subject. All those things tell you that this has to be some type of writing in order to qualify, or to be an item that would qualify it as an adult bookstore. And this is something that I've addressed in the appeal as well, is that the state of North Dakota has set forth general zoning powers, and there's the ability out there to regulate adult products, and that's just something that specifically the city of Fargo in its zoning or its land development code has chosen not to do. There's just no definitions, no mechanisms for adult products, which is of course the emphasis of the denial letter. So whether I think the city is, with their presentation, trying to essentially say, oh, let's try to regulate adult products with the definition of an adult bookstore, and unfortunately the language of the code can't be used that way. It never has been used that way, it's never been interpreted that way, and it doesn't read that way.
Thank you. Question for the city attorney. We're obviously not gonna litigate this here. I just wanna, we obviously just heard their legal opinion of what the definition is. I'm assuming the city's response is that it's, or your opinion is that it's contrary to what their definition is.
I agree with you, Chairman, that we would disagree
Okay.
with the interpretation presented by council.
All right, thank you.
Can I hypothesize or I guess speculate, what is the definition of not an adult bookstore? Like, where's the line? Obviously, it's subjective, as I see it. I don't know where lingerie turns into inappropriate versus, obviously lewd photos or something like that would be pretty clear. But again, going back to the descriptions in products on the wall, obviously they're very, I guess, anatomically correct. So how are we to determine what is a adult bookstore based on what we have in front of us?
I would say, so the definition isn't exactly clear. I mean, I think everyone's established that, but I mean, I think what we're trying to determine is, was the zoning administrator's interpretation of that, was that correct or was that an error based on the intent? My belief is based on the intent of that zoning language. And, I'm pretty sure, like we just heard, there's differing legal opinions of what that definition is. I mean, we're obviously not a court of law. We're not going to adjudicate that. But so I think our role here is to determine, based on the intent of that land development code provision, was the zoning administrator's interpretation appropriate?
And if I could maybe reframe that for you, I see a lot of nods in agreement with the code being subjective and unclear.
I didn't say the code was subjective. I said the language wasn't clear.
Understood. The what you have before you is a permit to change the occupancy of this building to a retail sales and use establishment. There's no contention by the city that a retail sales and use establishment is not permitted in the DMU or in this specific location. What Romantics has applied for, well, actually what Gills originally had applied for, is a change of use to retail sales and use. That is a by right classification in this zoning district. And here you're asked to take the zoning or the planning department's word on what this establishment might be, when quite frankly, as we discussed before, there are mechanisms for this. This is designed to be a retail sales and use. It is permitted by right in the zoning classification. And if the actual establishment there is something different than retail sales and use, then there's an enforcement mechanism for that. Hopefully there's a conversation mechanism for that beforehand. But for what is actually proposed here before you, which is a change of occupancy to retail sales and use, there's no reason to deny that, because that use is permitted by right in this zoning classification.
Could I ask that same question then to the city attorney? Would there be a enforcement mechanism if they were permitted, if they were found to be in violation of the adult bookstore?
I'm going to defer to Nicole on that as well.
Yeah, basically, with zoning enforcement, we have a system where we file violations and notices through the municipal court system, and that is basically the mechanism.
I have a comment just for the board, and that would be the way this business portrays themselves and advertises. So the little snapshot of the advertisement, they actually call themselves an entertainment center, Romantics Entertainment Center. And specifically, adult entertainment centers are not allowed. And, it can come down to the exact words, but it's also the intent. You know, what is the intent of this store? And is it that it would provide some entertainment for those who enter? And there's an advertisement out there on the internet that says that it's intended for entertainment. And you can qualify and say, well, we're not going to do that here, or we'll omit that, or, you know, you described your mannequins, but it really comes down to the intent.
And member, if I may, the intent is to comply with the zoning code. The adult entertainment center label that was placed on the screen earlier isn't something adopted by the establishment. That is a label that someone on Google slapped onto the business. And for the business in question, which is located in an appropriate location, that one is, well, quite frankly, adult entertainment center isn't a term that has meaning in the Fargo Land Development Code. I believe it's adult recreation center is the catch-all term that the zoning code uses, and that would include any type of, you know, arcade or theater or adult bookstore. That romantics is those things. Quite frankly. And this is a different location. And the intent here is to carry products that would not fall within the definition of an adult bookstore and to comply with the general retail sales and use classification. What other stores do in other parts of the city doesn't define what this store does here.
Although you use the same name.
Yes.
That's very confusing to me.
Yes, it's branding and trademarks cost money, put it that way, and it's not necessarily easy to have a different name on every particular establishment. But the zoning code doesn't regulate by trade name or the like. It regulates by the actual use that will occur on the property, and here it's going to be a use that fits in the retail sales and use classification.
Are there any further questions, or are we ready to act?
I'm ready for a vote.
Any other questions?
Great, thank you, members, for your time.
Thank you. Entertain a motion?
I make a motion that the Board of Adjustment affirm the staff's decision to deny and change the change of use permit based on the determination that the proposed use is considered an adult bookstore, which is a use not allowed in the downtown mixed-use zoning district.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I still find it difficult to make a determination on something that I'm not fully comprehending, where the line between adult bookstore is and what a retail center. The Supreme Court has literally had the same conversation. Like, I don't know that we can define this here today. So I don't know how we can make a determination, sound judgment without knowing the definition, where that line is. Is that something that the city can further define? And obviously you guys are redeveloping the land development code, and in the future, maybe that's a conversation. But we are here today to make a decision. I guess I'm at a loss.
Is that a question, member?
Yes. Do you have a
Is
specific
there any
question?
more definition that we can find? I guess I have a hypothetical. Could someone else, not a romantics, someone else come in today with a new adult retailer, let's call them, and having no prior business, apply for an application and put the same application in, and because they were not labeled as an adult entertainment online, would they be allowed to do the same thing?
So first of all, we don't tend to work in hypotheticals as part of a
Right.
permit application. But I think I can appreciate the
Nuance.
nuance, thank you. And so one of the grounding aspects for the planning department when we considered this specific application is the fact that it's zoned DMU, downtown mixed use. So any adult-oriented business is not allowed in the downtown mixed use. Not conditionally allowed like it is in some other zoning districts, but in downtown mixed use. So as such, since we believe, based on the materials that's been presented to us by the applicant, separate and apart from their existing businesses and separate and apart from their online presence, is there enough evidence to show us that there's some adult-oriented activity there, therefore, it's not allowed in downtown mixed use? So that is our line of thinking. And when you look at the subject materials for additional information like store layout, et cetera, there's retail descriptors that are called adult novelties. You'll see a communication in the packet, in the very thick packet, of adult novelties and where they distinguish between novelties and adult novelties. Just the fact that we're talking about adult-oriented type of business is what is having staff fall on the interpretation we have to date. And you're right, Board Member Breen, this is not a subject matter that is easy to process, and there's obviously a lot of court action related to it.
I guess to that same point, what are the, if denied today, what are the venues that the applicant can go towards?
All the way through City Commission and onward. So every decision is appealable all the way to the top.
Yeah, I guess maybe further discussion of that. I guess I'm still, Nicole, you mentioned adult uses not allowed in DMU. And I think I'm reading Exhibit 5, page 2, there's in an email chain, adult uses include adult bookstore, adult cinema, adult entertainment facility, and adult entertainment center. So I go back to the definition of adult bookstore, kind of back to that same definition that was defined and clarified in 2019. I know it's a different area, different land use, but my trouble right now is going back to the definition, and it was technically defined regardless of the location of it. It was defined as within that 2019 correspondence as, no books, no novelties and stuff like that. So that's what I'm having difficulty. There's no other clarifications within the DMU table saying that, any other further clarification, it still uses those same definitions. So if there was something in the DMU saying a little bit further explanation of adult bookstore, adult orientated general merchandise, then yes, I could see that. That's what I'm having difficulty with. I think that definition carries throughout, no matter if it's a DMU or limited industrial or anything like that. So I don't know, maybe you want to respond to that, or that's just my logic right now. That's what I'm having trouble.
Well, I think you do have a motion on the floor, so if that is a question that you'd like me to discuss, I'd be glad to, but I defer to the chair.
Yeah, do you wish her to respond to that?
Yeah,
or-
if you could respond to that.
So the question is,
I-
you're struggling with, there was a different interpretation of this other site than.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything in the DMU table? I'm looking at Exhibit 5, page 2. Is there anything in the DMU downtown mixed use that further clarifies that, or does it still use those same three definitions?
So I think the question before us today, and maybe first if I can address the zoning confirmation letter. I can't remember which board member said this, but, it's really, if we want to get to the heart of the item, is if stock and trade, comma, or stock and trade, et cetera, media, things like that, right? And so it's really to that specific of maybe a verbal debate that we've had attorney to attorney. And if we go back to the purpose again of a zoning confirmation letter is not to give the permit. So let's just say a staff member made an error in an email correspondence or in a letter correspondence does not give someone the right to violate the ordinance. So let's just make that case. And then third, if, I think it's really about your question, Member Heller, in terms of, that's literally the question in front of you today. No, it's not directly, what we have is the table, downtown mixed use, then we have the definition of adult activities related into the sections of the ordinance. And that is the power and the duty of the zoning administrator to interpret amongst the code based on our powers of our master plans and what sets forth by the values of our public, which includes the incentives, the Renaissance zone, the plan of the purpose of a zoning ordinance is to implement the values and master plans and comprehensive plan as set forth by the community and the public and the elected officials.
That answer your question?
It seems to me then if we are stuck on semantics or definitions or anything, it's kind of goes back to our original question of what our job here is to determine whether or not the city has erred. And if I come down to the answer of I don't know, then I think the answer is then we have to vote for this because we don't know beyond this. So it has to go to a higher level in order to be further reviewed.
Yeah, I think, the presumption of correctness is on this, should go to the city. And, it's up to the appellant to convince us otherwise. I guess if you're unsure, then, I suppose you could abstain from voting, or, if you're unsure, like it says, the presumption of correctness should go to the city. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion, or are we ready to vote? All right, hearing none, please call the roll. Just to clarify, a yes vote is to affirm the staff's decision to deny the change of use.
Wendell Dobb,
Yes.
Breen,
Yes.
Heller,
No.
Orth,
Yes.
Love.
Yes. So your appeal has been denied. You're allowed to appeal this decision to the city commission. And how many days do they have to do that? 10 days?
10 days, but we'll work with the applicant to make sure that date works since they're traveling.
Okay. All right. No other business on the agenda, so unless members have other business they want to discuss? Nope, okay. And we'll adjourn then. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.